Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Cape Talk.
You are with Cape Talk on this beautiful Friday morning. And of course, that big appointment every Friday just after 9:30 with the Naked Scientist. Dr. Chris Smith is a lecturer at Cambridge University, and he's a very busy day. On a Friday, he gives us half an hour of it to answer our questions. You're absolutely welcome to drop your questions via WhatsApp on 072 567 1567, a voice note or a text note on that number, or you are able to call 021 446 0567, and we'll prioritize that call for the Naked Scientist. Welcome, Dr. Chris Smith.
Oh, hi, Clarence. Another great week in the world of science. You know, I had a fantastic interview this week with a lady in Harvard, and her name's Ali Probst, and they've come up with this really cool way to tackle malaria. Of course, we all know what malaria is. It's the worst, or one of the worst scourges on the planet. 500,000 to 750,000 people die every year of malaria. Lots of them young kids. So the more we can do to try to, most of them in Africa too. And anything we can do to try to reduce the risk has got to be good. And of course, we're fighting an uphill struggle with this because A, the parasites become resistant to the drugs we give people, and B, the mosquitoes have become resistant to the stuff we put on bed nets to kill the mosquitoes. What's her solution? Treat the mosquitoes for malaria. Sounds a bit weird. Why on earth would you worry about the health of a mosquito? But actually, what they do, they've come up with some small molecules and found one very promising one, which you spray onto surfaces. So they're thinking bed nets initially, but no reason why you have to stop there. You could spray clothing, you could spray walls and curtains and so on. In just a few minutes of contact with a mosquito, enough of this stuff goes through from the surface, through the feet of the mosquito, into the mosquito's body, and it kills 100% of malarial parasites in the mosquitoes within minutes. And it doesn't matter if the mosquito has already been infected or hasn't been infected yet. It works in both circumstances. Absolutely stunning. Now, it's at an early stage. They need to do the next series of trials yet, but that looks really promising, completely novel way to approach the problem of malaria, and potentially very cheap as well. So you can actually hear her talking. I'm just about to publish the programme where I did the interview with her. It's on The Naked Scientist. That'll come out later today. She's a brilliant speaker. So tune in, give that one a listen. Great story.
I just love it when you bring this cutting-edge research to our station on a Friday. Maybe you should go and snoop around the campus on a weekly basis and tell us where things are at. Absolutely fascinating. And what comes out of Cambridge as well. Very, very significant stuff we've been reporting on of late. Let's go to some of the questions. Dr. Chris, if life began from a single cellular organism, how and when did male and female come about? That's from Leon in Athlone.
Hi, Leon. Well, we don't actually know how life got started, but we can speculate, and we also know it got started really, really early on Earth, but it stayed primitive for a really, really long time. So let's put some numbers on this. We know the planet is about 4.5 billion years old, 4,500 million years. We've got some of the oldest rocks on Earth. Some of them are in South Africa, but the oldest ones, Pip to the Post, Australia, Western Australia, Jack Hills Formation and things like that. Some of those rocks are nearly as old as the planet. We've got samples from those rocks going back about 4.1 billion years, and trapped inside those samples are snapshots of what the environment was like in the form of gas molecules and isotopes of various particles, including oxygen and carbon, nitrogen, that kind of thing, that were in the atmosphere at the time. And so you can use these like a time capsule, and we know that when life processes get started, they seem to inflict a certain fingerprint on the chemistry of the environment. They select for and enrich certain isotopes or forms of different chemicals over others. So we can see that process kick in pretty quickly. By about 4.1 billion years, there's reasonably compelling evidence that there were life processes happening on Earth. But we don't find anything in the fossil record that really says there was complicated life until relatively recently, the last 500 million to 750 million years, so 700 million years-ish ago, we start to see metazoal life, where cells have teamed up to form more complicated organisms. Before that, well, we have got evidence of ancient life. We've got things like stromatolites, which are deposits laid down by simple organisms. So we think that for a long time, most of Earth's history, life was single-celled organisms akin to bacteria and similar sorts of microorganisms. And it's only in the more recent era we then got cells teaming up together and producing multicellular life. And then at some point, fairly recently, sex got started. Well, when I say fairly recently, that's fairly recently in Earth's history, but fairly soon after life got started, sex seems to have got started, because we've quite quickly then got evidence of complicated life forms like reptiles, sharks and so on from 400 million years ago. So we know that was happening, and we know there were males and females. So as soon as life gets complicated, sex comes along. That's no surprises there, is it? Sex complicates everything. But why would that kick in so quickly? It must confer a massive advantage, and indeed it does. Why do we have sex? Well, apart from the fact, Richard Feynman, who got the Nobel Prize, famously said, science is like sex. Both have practical results, but that isn't why we do it. That isn't why we do it necessarily all the time, but it is why nature does it, because it's an opportunity to mix up genetic material. This is why sex exists, because if you just clone yourself and make genetically identical copies, you are highly vulnerable to threats coming in from the environment that can exploit you, and you cannot be sufficiently agile to outpace them. If you have sex, you are mixing your genetic code with another's genetic code to produce a hybrid genetic code. This introduces more genetic resilience and diversity, and this makes you more successful in the long run. So we don't know exactly when it happened, but we know it happened pretty promptly after complicated life got started.
Okay, now this morning we had a little debate. In fact, it was a debate that was introduced by Lester Kivitt, and it follows on French, maybe controversial advice, but a French agency essentially recently in Feb 2025 issued recommendations aimed at reducing the frequency of washing clothes for environmental reasons. And that debate has kind of resurfaced in our show. Diane writes, French manicure, the painted white tips, because their nails were so dirty and bathing and washing was rare. Europe is vastly different climate. We are in Africa. We sweat. We must wash our clothes. But essentially, the agency's advice was that jeans, you got to wash it after 30 wears, bras after 7 wears, t-shirts after 5 wears, sportswear after 3 wears, wool jumpers after 15 wears, and bed sheets and pajamas weekly. What would your recommendation be, considering, of course, Diane's contribution that we are hotter here and we're more sweaty?
It depends what you do and where you do it. And if you wind the clock back, people didn't wash from 1 month to the next. We were really filthy. And if you look at history books, you'll see that it was pretty cold for most of the year in places like England. Water, clean water, and especially hot water, that was an expensive luxury to have in the sorts of quantities you needed to have a bath. So most people just didn't. And there are billions of us on Earth, and we've inherited a pretty rich genetic legacy from those people that makes us pretty successful as a species. So bottom line here is a bit of dirt doesn't harm anybody. We've become obsessed with sterility in the modern era, probably out of fashion and other things and social pressures. And this is leading us to probably throw the baby out with the bathwater. We go over the top in terms of cleanliness and sterility. We probably wash ourselves and wash our things far too much, far more than is necessary. And we were able to get away with it back in history. We're still made of the same genetic stuff, so we ought to be able to get away with it in the modern era. And therefore, really, it comes down to what you think you can get away with socially. Because remember, putting things in the wash is very expensive. It claps the clothes out. The more you wash them, the faster they wear out, and the sooner you're going to have to buy new ones. So not washing stuff, because the washing machine is a horrible thing to do to clothing. It rips them to pieces, really. So washing them less saves you money. It saves you money on the detergent. It saves you money on the water and the electricity. So if you don't need to wash something, don't feel you have to wash it. There's a famous thing called the sniff test. Lift up the clothing item. If it smells okay, wear it again, with exceptions. Socks and pants, I draw the line there. I do wash socks and pants. I'm pretty stringent with those. But shirts. The thing is, if yes, you may live in a hot country, but if you're working all day in an aircon office and you've got an air-conditioned car and an air-conditioned home, you're not going to sweat profusely. If, on the other hand, you're out active on a building site all day and you are sweating buckets, of course you're going to be filthy and you want to wash things more often. So really, it's horses for courses. Use your common sense.
Okay, it's a double-barrel question, Ian. One from Geordie and one from Frank. So I thought I'd combine the two. Geordie's question: is there any relation between the force of gravity and the magnetic north or south field? And the second question is: why are the poles moving and will they shift? The Naked Scientist.
Well, first of all, I mean, the planet is round, and we have around the waist of our planet a slightly fatter waist, a bit like many people, because the planet is spinning. And inside the core of the planet is an iron core, which is also spinning, and we think that's what gives us our magnetic field. The reason that the iron is there is because of gravity. So you could argue that gravity does help us to beget our magnetic field, because if you didn't have the iron in the centre of the Earth spinning around, then there would not be a magnetic field. So yes, gravity and the magnetic field of the Earth are linked, but that's not why the poles are where they are. It just so happens that the field we've created ends up being like a giant bar magnet inside the Earth, with the north at one end and the south at the other. The second part of the question: why are these poles moving? Well, they are moving, and we've got maps and charts which go back hundreds of years. If you go back to Captain Cook's expeditions, for example, down in the Pacific, you can see how he charted what was magnetic north versus true north at the time, and they're wildly different then compared to where they are today. Why is there a disparity? Well, the planet is north to south across the poles, but where that bar magnet sitting inside the planet is slightly off to one side. And it's off because of that spinning iron core. And the way that the core behaves and the way that the core rotates gives us the field. And if that has slight currents or changes in the way that it works, that's going to make a difference. There are also other geomagnetic anomalies that happen on the Earth's surface because you get changes in the composition of the crust material that's at the surface of the Earth. And that can also deform and distort the magnetic field. So yes, gravity helps to have the field because the iron's very dense and sits in the middle of the planet, and that's spinning, and that's giving us our field, but that's not why we have the north-south where it is. That's just the way it's ended up. And occasionally, periodically, every few 100,000 years, it flips round, and the north magnetic pole becomes the south magnetic pole, although it hasn't happened lately. We're overdue for it to happen.
And then another question, and again, coming out of that question, is why is north, north, and south, south? Does it matter? It was Dr. Chris Smith that said, regardless of where you are in the universe, you're at its center.
No, because the thing is, it's only up and down for our planet. And if you came to our planet from a totally different planet, then you might be flying upside down in your spacecraft, and you would conclude that the South Pole is the top and the North Pole is the bottom, because space doesn't have an up and a down. It's only on Earth that we've decided what's up and what's down.
Okay, that question answered then. Let's go to Keith's question. Why can't adult teeth grow back if you lose it, like baby teeth, or what do they call it, baby teeth or a youngster's teeth?
Well, in some animals, of course, they can. If you look at animals like rabbits and horses, they have teeth that grow continuously. It's only in us, for example, and animals like us that have primary milk teeth and then secondary adult teeth or dentition. And the reason we have resorted to this is because we do a huge amount of growing in a confined period of our life, and then we stay in one size or state for the rest of our life. So when you're a baby, you couldn't have adult teeth fitting in your mouth because your mouth is just not big enough, despite some babies' efforts to prove you wrong. So you have a set of dentition, milk teeth, that come through early. They are then replaced by adult teeth, which displace the primary dentition from below, push them out of the way, and then take up their position in the jaw. And it's all about where those teeth come from. They are produced by stem cells called odontoblasts. And these produce a model tooth in the jaw, which is like a scaffolding, and then it gets mineralized with the dentine, the softer stuff in the middle, and then the hard enamel, which is the phosphate, the calcium phosphate and fluorophosphate around the outside, and that's the hard bit of the tooth. That forms in situ and then pushes up through the gum and takes up its position in the mouth. But once you have done that once and replaced the cells once, you don't have a new population of those stem cells to grow new teeth with. So a tooth loss as an adult is a permanent tooth loss, unless you're a rabbit, in which case you can continuously grow your teeth.
And a question in about scientific and spiritual knowledge. Can it be reconciled?
Well, I often say that science is all about evidence, and it's all about a hypothesis and testing that hypothesis to either prove or disprove it, or add further weight to the fact that it might be true. Spirituality and religion and philosophy and that kind of thing, these are about thinking about things a certain way, but they aren't necessarily supported by facts. Philosophy, a bit different, but certainly religion and spirituality, this is a state of mind, this is what people think, this is people's belief systems. This is not the same as science, and the two are not readily bedfellows. I don't think they're necessarily in dispute with one another all the time, but they don't really have any place being together because they're two totally different things. They're a sort of apples and oranges comparison, because I could write down anything I wanted in a book and call it a religious text and then tell people to follow it. Doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean it's actually based on any kind of facts. It's just what I thought at the time. Whereas scientifically, I hope I couldn't get away with that.
Dr. Chris Smith, a regular interaction, Fridays after 9:30, now 9:52. Claire's got a question. It reads, my sister has a Tiguan. It's a car. It's a VW. It continues. It attracts insects. Muggies. What's a muggie in English? I'm not quite certain. That collect on the roof of the car and travel with the car as it moves off from being parked. Why does this happen when a car parked next door, it doesn't attract the flying insects? Why essentially would her VW be attracting little flying insects?
I thought she was going to say she had a VW bug, but there you go. Ba-boom. The answer is probably the colour. I don't know for sure, and I don't know what the insects she references are, but probably colour. Insects have interesting visual systems that are really, really driven by colour. And this is because many insects rely on nectar for food, and where do they get nectar? From flowers. How do flowers attract them? They display all kinds of interesting colours. So certain colours, certain hues, and also certain paint configurations reflect certain colours, including colours we can't see. And some insects are very, very driven by things like ultraviolet, for example, and some surfaces are going to produce a lot of reflections in that particular regime. So it could be that it's reflecting a colour we can't even see, but colour is probably the reason. Temperature also plays a part. We know that insects are temperature sensitive, and a colleague of mine at the University of Cambridge, Beverly Glover, has devoted a large chunk of her career to looking at how bees are attracted to certain flowers and how certain flowers lure in bees by making the flowers into miniature solar panels that are very good at soaking up solar energy and making their nectar warm, so the bees turn up and they have a nice solarium in which to bathe, and a warm drink is served to them. And this saves the bee some energy, because if the nectar is pre-warmed, the bee isn't wasting its own energy warming itself up. It gets a metabolic reward in the form of the sugar and a thermal reward in the fact that it's hot. So it could be either of those two factors. I'd put my money definitely on the colour, possibly on temperature.
Muggie, by the way, is gnat, I believe.
There you go.
Okay, so I guess if you had the answer to this question, you'd be a multi-billionaire. But what is the quickest scientific way to lose weight in 5 days? Lisa, with that question.
Well, Lisa, the fact is that your body mass is determined by the balance between the energy that's coming in and the energy that's going out. And when we go on a diet, a lot of weight is lost very, very quickly, but most of it's water, because we begin to burn off stored sugar molecules, usually glycogen, which binds a lot of water. So when you first go on a diet, you'll burn the sugar, lose the glycogen, and that doesn't have anywhere. That means there's nowhere for the water to go, so you pee it out. So you see a dramatic weight loss in the first 5 days very often, and people go, wow, this dieting lark is easy. And then they start to burn the fat in week 2 and 3 onwards. And that's when it slows down and you're only losing a couple of pounds a week. But you will lose a lot of weight in 5 days very quickly just by cutting down the number of calories that you eat. And the key to a successful diet isn't just dramatically losing loads of weight really quickly. It's actually the long term and keeping it off. And the mistake that many people make is that they don't think first, what has made it so that I tended to be heavier than I would like in the first place? You've got to look at the factors that meant that you were a bit heavy or not your ideal weight to start with, and then ask, what do I need to change that got me like that to mean that I'm not getting any fatter. And then when you lose the weight, you make sure you embrace those changes so that you stay at the correct new weight that you want to be.
We have a voice note. Let's take a listen.
Hi, just a question for the naked scientist, a follow-up on the teeth example that he discussed now. Is it true that our eyeballs are actually the same size when we're born as for our whole life? Yeah, Mark in Kenilworth. Thank
Hi,
you.
Mark.
And,
It's really
we've got
interesting.
to go to news soon.
I was thinking about that just the other day because I have a new puppy because my dog is a dad. And so we've got his daughter. And she doesn't see very well, and he didn't see very well when they were both little. And as they got bigger, in his case, he's obviously full grown now, and as she's getting bigger, she is seeing better. And her eyes are definitely getting bigger. Now, there's this claim that the human eyeball, when you're born, doesn't get bigger between babyhood and adulthood, and that's why babies appear to have disproportionately big eyes. But I'm not sure if this is entirely true. So I'm going to go and have a look and see what the actual objective evidence is, because I'm sure that babies' eyes are smaller than adult eyes. I'm sure of it. Certainly in my dog's case, her eyes are getting bigger. So I'm not sure I believe this. So I'm going to take this away as homework, Mark, and I'm going to have a good look at what the evidence is and whether it's true in humans, true in all animals, true in none. And I'll come back next week and tell you.
And we appreciate you, the naked scientist, Dr. Chris Smith. That appointment every Friday after 9:30. He answers those questions that keep you out of sleep. Fridays, right here on Views and News.
Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Kate Talk.